let me say as a preface to my remarks that I appreciate the work of Senator Corker, the ranking member on this committee, on these issues. He has vigorously pursued them, was willing to use, because he believed it was right, his own personal political capital in terms of the ratification of the treaty, and made very significant impacts on what that looked like. And so I appreciate his work. Let me thank you all very much for joining us today. We have three experienced nonproliferation officials nominated for key international security posts. Each of these nominees, in my opinion, is a qualified professional, more than capable to assume their new role. Should they be confirmed, they will be in the vanguard of Americans' diplomatic negotiations on nonproliferation and compliance issues, and we welcome them to the committee. We've heard already about our nominee to the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Rose Gottmuller, Frank Rose to be the Assistant Secretary of State for Arms Control Verification and Compliance, and Adam Scheinman to be the Special Representative of the President for Nuclear Nonproliferation with the rank of Ambassador. Each has a full and clear background in nonproliferation, compliance, and verification. Each is fully aware of the new threats that we face, the state and non-state actors who represent those threats, and the importance and impact of every decision they will make. They'll be facing both ongoing and new issues when it comes to negotiations with Russia, chemical weapons in Syria, the threat of proliferation of nuclear weapons in North Korea and Iran. These nominees will be implementing and verifying the New START Treaty, which provides transparency and stability in our strategic relations with Russia. They'll also be exploring the potential for further reductions in U.S. and Russia nuclear forces. We know further reductions are possible because a comprehensive review of our nuclear posture has determined we can ensure the security of America and our allies and maintain a strong and credible strategic nuclear deterrent while reducing our forces. Obviously, clearly the obvious question, which I'd like to hear in our panelists' answers, is to what extent do the Russians also support further negotiations and continued verifiable reductions? In Syria, we're facing the issue of ridding the regime of its chemical weapons arsenal and the details of the proposed framework for the elimination of those weapons, the verification of Syria's compliance with provisions to destroy chemical weapons production, mixing, and filling equipment by November, and the verifiable and enforceable destruction of all of Syria's arsenal by the middle of 2014. And I'm curious to hear about the challenges we face in implementing this framework, should it ultimately move forward, and what role each of you may play in carrying out its provisions. Finally, in Iran, our policy is clear. We will not allow the development of nuclear weapons capability. As the President noted in his speech at the UN, the election of President Rouhani has opened up the possibility of a diplomatic approach to resolving these issues surrounding Iran's nuclear program. But despite the positive words coming out of Tehran, and they sounded better to me when they were coming out of Tehran than what I heard in New York the other day, but regardless of those words, Iran has continued to add capabilities to its nuclear program, including 2,000 centrifuges with 300 of these more advanced second-generation ones. So while I support constructive engagement with Iran, our policies must be based upon Iranian actions, not merely words. That's why I want to hear from our panelists how our sanctions policies, which help bring Iran to the negotiating table, can be further strengthened in response to Iran's continuing march towards nuclear capability. I'm also looking forward to hearing what requirements our panelists see as necessary for concluding an agreement with Iran. And at a minimum, shouldn't we expect Iran to suspend its enrichment as required by the United Nations Security Council resolutions, close the Fordo plant, reveal the location of all nuclear facilities, and allow international inspectors in Iran in order to verify that these facilities can only be used for peaceful purposes? In terms of North Korea, the U.S. has stated we will not accept North Korea as a nuclear weapons state, which would potentially unleash an arms race in the region and threaten our security and the security of our allies. I'd like to hear from each of you what you believe we can do to move in that direction, to ensure that the North Koreans return to the table, and what we must do to ensure that the North is not sharing information and becoming a dangerous source of proliferation and nuclear weapons technology. So there are many challenges clearly before us, And I think those challenges make a compelling case that we need qualified people sitting in the key positions to help us meet those challenges. I know that there are differences on the committee when it comes to these issues and how we treat them, and for some, these nominees. I know that there are deeply held positions on both sides of the aisle as to their record and views. But regardless of our differences, I believe there are a number of things we can all agree upon. We can all agree that we face a new and more complex set of proliferation threats: the threat of terrorists getting their hands on and using nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons, the danger of regional armed nuclear adversaries like North Korea and Iran using their nuclear capabilities to blackmail our partners and allies. In response to these threats, I think we can all agree that we need a more modern and flexible nuclear enterprise and updated policies that can respond to these new threats as well as the old threats we face. What I would say to members of the committee is that at the end of the day, we may disagree on verification and compliance procedures, but we cannot disagree on the significance of the threats we face and the need to have a team in place that is tasked with representing our security interests at the highest level. So I appreciate many of the members' engagement. I want to turn to the distinguished ranking member for his comments, and then I'll introduce our other two nominees, and we'll move forward.